Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to So Many Books, So Little Time. This is show 21. My name is Joe Nash, and I'm here with Zina, Shevchik. We both are librarians here at the Colonie Library. If you don't know our show, the premise is very simple. Zina and I go down to the new bookshelf, and we go down to the technical services department where all our new books are being processed, and we are going to tell you about a lot of new books. Zina, as usual, will go first.
Okay. This book is a delight, and I'm going to read it with great attention after this show. It's called Tolstoy and the Purple Chair, My Year of Magical Reading by Nina Sankovic. With my name like Shevchik, I should be able to pronounce this, but I can't. Sankovic. It's a memoir, kind of they're labeling it a mourning or a grieving memoir, but it's not sad. I mean, it didn't make me cry. This author grew up in an immigrant family to the U.S. They had recent immigrants to the U.S. when she was a young girl, and they read all the time. The family, they read to each other all the time. The mother and the father and the children, and she talks about all of her wonderful experiences with her sisters, sharing books back and forth all through their lives, kind of being the glue that kept them together. And it's about this author's losing her sister. Her sister was 46 when she died of cancer. It was kind of a quick death. And how after a couple of years of trying to get over her sister's death, she decided that when she herself, the author, turned 46, she was going to try to read a book a day for an entire year. And so it is a memoir of her growing up, her relationship with her sister, and her grieving process as interwoven with commentary on all these books that she read during this 1 year. Now, she has 4 sons, so it was quite an effort to get this project taken care of. But she also wrote reviews on a blog during that year of each book she read, and one of the reviewers say her selection of books was eclectic, international, and unpredictable. The only criteria being that it was readable, each book was readable in a day. There's lots of predictable, I would say, titles and authors in here, but there are, I have little yellow tags here in the pages where she mentions books that I haven't read or I didn't know about, and I'm going to take that list and see if I want to try and read some of those as well. And she has a blog as well called readallday.org. So I highly recommend this. I don't know what the point of Tolstoy is. It says Tolstoy and the Purple Chair, but the Purple Chair is where she did a lot of her reading in her home. So I have yet to figure out why she called it Tolstoy. Maybe his book was the longest, or maybe it meant the most to her or something. But it talks about how the importance of books in her life and how reading can be cathartic for a lot of people, and really, as our librarians certainly know, it can enhance just about anybody's life. So I highly recommend this, and but I've got first dibs on it. But maybe by the time this show is shown, I'll have finished it. Tolstoy and the Purple Chair, My Year of Magical Reading by Nina Sankovic.
Right now, what were some of the books she read?
Well, typical things, Louisa May Alcott, those are the some of the adventure stories. Stevenson, things she hadn't read, by the way. Some of the mystery, who's Agatha Christie. Some of those are typical, but there's a lot in here that I hadn't read.
Yeah, okay.
And so those are the ones that I'm interested in. Okay. And it was interesting because as they were growing up, they'd read so much,
yeah.
and the ones that she picked that she had missed were interesting too.
Right.
So,
well, my first book, it's been out for a while, but it's still new. It was on the new bookshelf, so I can talk about it. And this is an example of, we probably all done this, but Zina, have you ever judged a book by its cover?
yes.
Well, this is a double whammy, because not only you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, when we have this perception of this person I'm going to tell you about, you would think this person, there's no way, could write a book. Or I mean, not that couldn't write a book, but it wouldn't be very interesting. But anyway, I'm about 1/4 of the way through it, and it's really good. It's called Life by Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, and if you can see the cover there, it's...
I don't know what he's smoking.
He's smoking a cigarette, and he's got the ring with the skull on it. And you would think, all right, Keith Richards, our perception of him is some
wild
man. But
drug
I got to say, I'm about 1/4 of the way through this. This book is really good. I can't tell you, it's so unexpected. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't expect much, but he was born in the late 40s. A lot of insight into post-World War II Britain in the 50s, because they were on rations till I think the late 50s,
yes,
57, 58.
Long time. Right.
It's good insight into that. When they first came over in the early 60s, they went through down south. A lot of insight into the United States at that time, 63, 64. They saw a lot of stuff by traveling all over.
Boy, I better read that. That's my history.
Good insight into music and their devotion to the blues, and just how hard they worked as a band before they made it big. I think there's a streak in there. They said they played literally practically every night for a couple of years straight. I mean, a day or two off here and there, but the amount of time and effort they put into it was totally amazing. It's very well written, actually. And
Does he have a ghostwriter?
Well, I think someone wrote it with him, a journalist, but it obviously with James Fox. But it's very insightful. I keep saying that word, but it's really I didn't think
history, not
I
just
thought it'd be
him.
about crazy rock and roll, but a lot of it is a lot of sociological stuff about America and UK. A lot of stuff about music and he attributes the success of the Rolling Stones to Charlie Watts. He said, without Charlie Watts, we wouldn't have been anything, because his drumming is so great. He kind of explains the way he drums. I'll have to go back and listen, but a really good book. I can't...
Is that what does Keith Richards, he's a guitar player?
He's a guitar
player.
player.
Yeah, okay.
So it's really got good insights into all kinds of the music. I'm only about 1/4 of the way through. Right now I'm at the part where they're just about to make it big, but a lot of stuff about the music business and how they get cheated out of tons of money when they were young and how they were starving, all that. Really good book. Life by Keith Richards.
I have to say, I would have avoided it, but now I'll try it.
And that's what everyone's saying. I've talked to several people that have read it and a lot of reviews saying, don't be put off by what you think of Keith Richards. It's really good.
Good. I'll try that. The audience should try it too. Okay, this is something I didn't know about because I don't have cable TV at home. It's called Clark Howard's Living Large in Lean Times, 250 plus ways to buy smarter, spend smarter, and save money. So apparently he's the host of the Clark Howard Show on some cable network. And the byline here, or the subtitle is, it's not about the money you earn, but the money you save. And for all of you who don't have access to the Clark Howard Show on cable, or his blog, apparently has a blog as well, I actually found this very interesting. I learned things I didn't know. But I'm in my 60s, so some of this I have picked up along the way. But other people may not know. Here's some of the just samples of some of the things that he says that, either were a surprise to me or I know already and think it's good advice. You should go 5,000 miles between oil changes, not the 3,000 that are recommended. Join a credit union. He explains how you can get free software online for office use, so you don't have to spend money on the Microsoft package suite. buy long-term care insurance in your late 50s or early 60s, which is what my husband and I just did. And we found out that was the right time to do it. Don't buy bottled water. Explains how to cut pills in half. Avoid private student loans. Avoid extended warranties on electronics. When to buy trip insurance. Don't buy gift cards. Use the internet radio instead of buying like Sirius, the satellite radio. There's lots of things about other consumer stuff, like freezing your credit checks on your credit reports. Buy top-tier auto insurance. In that case, he says it's worth the money. So it's just a nice how-to book, consumer finance. Everybody in these times wants to save as much as they can. Clark Howard's Living Large in Lean Times. Joe?
Very good. Well, we have both cable TV and computers at home. I've never heard of that guy. All right, now my next book, everyone's predicting the end, not only the end of publishing, the end of books, in this format. Apparently, a lot of people are saying that we're going to have the end of magazines too. However, there's still a lot of great magazine writing out there, and this is the annual collection. We have all the other ones. It's called The Best American Magazine Writing, 2010. An excellent collection, because I was looking through this, and between a lot of the magazines I read on my own and the newspapers, I've read several of these already, and they're really great. There's some really good ones in here. There's an introduction by John Meacham, former editor of Newsweek, and the writer of the book about Andrew Jackson, American Lion. He's a historian too. What they've done, they've assembled the best American magazine writing. This isn't from various sources: Esquire, the New Yorker, the New York Times magazine section. Let's see, the Boston Review, Wired, Orion, the Atlantic Monthly, etc. And there's some really good articles in here. John Meacham writes a wonderful little introduction. He's not lamenting the loss of good writing. He's saying it's still a viable thing, because he says the internet is better suited to the immediate and the visceral, as opposed to the considered and the reflective, like these articles.
Now, does he include anything from e-magazines or
Wired is
right.
is only online, isn't it?
Right.
So there's some few in here, but the article of the year you may have read. It was in the Sunday New York Times magazine section last year. It was about the one hospital during Hurricane Katrina, when people were trying to decide. I think there's some question about whether they actually euthanized some
nurses
people.
And the doctors, yes.
And I remember reading that. It was a heartbreaking article. And that's just one example that's in here. There's a story in here from the New Yorker, about a guy that was put to death in Texas. They think he started a fire that killed his kids. And it was a very controversial case. The guy was put to death. And this is one of the few times when I read this article in the New Yorker originally, it really looked like he was innocent. I mean, I'm not saying for sure. You never know, but it really looked like he was innocent. But I'm sure someone could write an article going the other way. But it seemed like the evidence really didn't point. And there's also articles in here by Atu Gawande. I think that's how you say his name. He's a medical writer for the New Yorker. He's a good writer. There's also a nice little story in here. I never pass up a chance to talk about John Cheever, one of my favorite authors. There's a story in here about John Cheever, how he's been a little misinterpreted. Everyone thinks he was anti-suburbs, but it turns out this guy thinks he really was sort of a conformist, and he was trying to fit in and everything. But nice. If you like John Cheever, it's really good. There's a story in here by Mitch Albom. He wrote, the 5 People You've Meet in Heaven, Tuesdays with Maury. He was a sports writer before all those books. He has a nice little article in here about Detroit. He's from Detroit, how Detroit has gone downhill. But
it's a renaissance is coming.
It is a renaissance, and you're right, because the name of the article is called "And Yet." ... So he talks about Detroit, what it used to be like when he was growing up in the heyday of being an industrial colossus, and all the sports teams, were good then, and what it is now. And he ends each section, "And yet, ... He thinks there's going to be a comeback. So it's sort of a love letter to Detroit and America. But there's also a story in here by Garrison Keillor from National Geographic. He wrote an article about the top 10 state fair joys.
Ooh. Ooh.
Do you think that deep fried butter is one of them?
Ooh.
During the, and well, I'll just mention one more. There's a story in here about Todd Marinovich. I think that's how you say his name. He was a guy that was in the 80s and 90s, I think the 90s. His father trained him to be an NFL quarterback from when he was born. He made him, the guy never had sugar until he was in his 20s. He worked him out, he massaged his muscles. His father was over the top. But he did finally make it to the NFL, but he only lasted 2 years. He became a heroin addict. I mean, I don't know if it was a rebellion against his father, but it's kind of a sad story. And the story's called The Man Who Never Was. It's very sad. So anyway, great magazine writing from last year. The Best American Magazine writing 2010. We have all the back down on the shelf. We have like the last 4 or 5 years worth. Wonderful writing.
You should put that on our display for beach reads because it's because they're short stories. People might like that to go on.
Well, I don't know if, reading about Hurricane Katrina and the hospitals and the beach. I don't know if it's beach reading. But.
Okay, my next book is. Now, this is something that I never would have picked up normally, and it's related to something the book Joe just talked about. This is called Life is a Highway, a Century, 100 Years of Great Automotive Writing. And it's got a great cover of a souped-up car, right? And it was the articles are short, the essays are short, comes from a wide range of, they're all car magazines, Car and Driver, Motor Trend, Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, Road and Track, something called Muscle Car Confidential. But some of the writers are Stephen King. There's an excerpt in here from his book on Christine.
It's a novel.
Is that a novel?
Yes.
Okay. And then Christine
so that has fiction and nonfiction.
Okay, so Christine is the car.
Yeah.
Hunter Thompson, Jack Kerouac from On the Road. Jay Leno talks about.
He's a car collector.
I know he's a car collector, and the essay in here, the article is funny and right on point. J. Edgar Hoover writes about in 1952 an article about auto theft is a big business, and that was in Motor Trend in 1952. There's things from early in the 1900s, 1906, 1917 about why the car is a wonderful thing, how it improves socialization, how to buy a car in the 1920s or 1930s. It's really very interesting, and the essays are quite short and very entertaining. And as it's supposed to be a century of our love affair with the auto. And there's some interesting pictures in here, and lots of things I learned, and funny and serious at the same time. I think one of a 2004 article in The Onion, which is satirical, right?
Yes,
in The Onion, satirical magazine. New anger-powered cars may revolutionize the way we drive, but an anonymous writer. So it's silly and serious at the same time, but very illuminating. So Life is a Highway, a century of great automotive writing.
All right, now that would be a good beach read, maybe.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
All right, now, as you know, Zina,
Yes, Joe, you got
I am a fan. I'm a fan of the Library of America.
Yes.
Uniform editions of America's best writers, or they consider the best. When they first started the Library of America, the choices were obvious. Mark Twain, Willa Cather, Henry James,
John Cheever.
Oh, everybody, yes. Well, John Cheever just made it, but because when they first started, one of the criteria was you couldn't be alive to be in this. They were the past. They did make some exceptions. Like right now, there's 6 volumes out on Philip Roth, and they're not done yet, and he's still alive. And I think the first edition,
his death may be imminent.
the first volume of Saul Bellow came out when he was alive. But basically, they're not. And it wasn't a criteria, but they were doing the past. So they're up to hundreds of editions with some specials. Like there's one about baseball. There's one I think I've talked about this
There
before.
was Civil War.
Civil War
Civil
one.
rights, right?
But anyway, here's the latest. And I guess if you make the Library of America, it means you've reached the canon status. So this is the latest Library of America edition, the first of, I think, 1 or 2 volumes, I'm not sure, by Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorites from way back.
He's kind of local connections.
Well, he actually lived in Schenectady for many years.
He taught at, didn't he taught?
That's his brother that taught at SUNY.
Oh, okay.
He was a PR man at Schenectady for GE, and hence when he wrote Player Piano, it's sort of a spoof at GE.
Right.
But anyway, it's the interesting thing about Kurt Vonnegut. I think some people think maybe he was of his time, the late 60s, early 70s, or I'm sorry, late 50s, all of the 60s, into the 70s. And you would think, would he still have staying power? Like, when you pick up one of these volumes, it's Henry James, of course, he'll be forever ensconced in our...
Classic.
But it's very interesting because a couple of years ago I reread some Kurt Vonnegut books, which I read when I was a teenager in my 20s, which I loved. I thought, well, would this really hold up now that I'm a more mature reader? And very interestingly, they did. Particularly Slaughterhouse-Five. Slaughterhouse-Five, say what you want about its crazy science fiction aspect, is truly a great anti-war novel. It really is. And I reread in that little bit there, Slaughterhouse-Five, Cat's Cradle, and Breakfast of Champions, which are all included in this, along with another one of my favorites, God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. And there's some short stories in here, a couple little speeches. So the latest from Library of America, if you want to go back and relive your late teens, early 20s and reread these, the latest from Library of America, the first volume for Kurt Vonnegut.
All right.
Did you read all those books when you were
I
younger?
didn't. I remember Cat's Cradle and I remember Slaughterhouse-Five, but I was in a time when the Vietnam War was a big, important part of our lives growing up. So those.
Well, Slaughterhouse-Five came out, I think, in 1969. So
yeah, that's right when I was in college,
Oh, okay.
and we were right before Kent State and all that.
All
So it was important. Actually, they were teaching him, I think, in college when I was in college. This has a little bit of a local connection too. Local history, local meaning the Northeast. This is a biography of Ethan Allen. Ethan Allen, His Life and Times by Willard Stern Randall. And it's got I don't know where this sculpture of Ethan Allen is. Probably I could find out if I read the side. No, I can't see if I. So anyway, this apparently is the first biography in 50 years, something like that, of Benedict Arnold. And the reviews say it's the first book that really makes Ethan Allen a multi-dimensional character.
You just said Benedict Arnold.
Did I say Benedict Arnold?
Is he in that book? No.
Yeah, well, the author did I say no?
You did.
I did. I said Benedict Arnold.
Ethan Allen.
This author has previously written biographies of Benedict Arnold and Thomas Jefferson, so that's probably. Thank you for catching that. I didn't get that at all. So the author has credentials in writing biographies of our founding fathers and etc. And this presents Ethan Allen as quite a charismatic, courageous blowhard in many ways.
The Green Mountain Boys, right?
Absolutely, the first successful vigilante troupe. But it talks about how he was obviously a larger-than-life character, and it talks about the negative side of his personality and character as well, and how he used a lot of his fame to create his own fortune in many ways, even though I guess a lot of it was legal, but borderline ethical. So it's quite a substantial biography, and I haven't read it, but I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention for those who like colonial revolutionary history and local history. It talks about Vermont, obviously, Green Mountain Boys, and it'll bring to mind a lot of the things we once learned in school.
Well, they went and took over. They went and they took Fort Ticonderoga from the British. That's kind of in our area a little bit.
Yep. See, it says, brings a character of Machiavellian morality, occupying a nebulous position between self-aggrandizing land speculator and latter-day Robin Hood. That's from a review. That was a positive review because they say they're giving him a complete, detailed character. So, Joe?
All right. Well, I have a book here this is more local than that one, though, because this book is about Colonie, New York.
All right.
We got a box the other day in our library. It had 2 copies of this book in here. It's called the Rapple Drive Chronicles. Rapple Drive is in Colonie. The author's last name, I guess you pronounce it Crade, C-R-A-D-E, Mike Crade. And he lives out in California, I think, because that's where the postmark is
He's a medical
from.
doctor, yes, and he's in California.
Oh, you know that? Oh, okay.
Well, I talked to him on the phone briefly.
You did? Okay. I didn't know you talked to him.
It was me.
So he sent us 2 books. He grew up in Colonie. The subtitle is Coming of Age in the Time of Robert Kennedy. I think a lot of the book takes place in 1968. It's got a funny little thing here. This is a map of the United States with the outline. And it's got one little dot with a little thing. It says Colonie, New York. It's kind of funny if you can see that.
One big page.
But the book has a lot of pictures and different typefaces. So I'm not sure. I think it's his little autobiography about, I guess around 1968, he was a teenager. And there's a lot of things mentioned locally. There's a picture of, he mentions all the radio, like WPTR. He mentions all the stations.
Boom Boom Brannigan?
I think he mentions them. There's some things in here about, was it the Mohawk Drive-In? He's got a picture of the drive-in. Yeah, the Mohawk Drive-In. There's a lot of pictures in here, but it's kind of written like a little novel. I'm not really sure. I didn't really read it yet, but there's pictures, different typeface. It's kind of, and you can see the cover is kind of, well, it's sort of, I'm not sure how old. Well, obviously, if he was in his teens, 1968, so he's probably mid-60s. So, if you want to know what it was like growing up in Colonie, specifically in the year 1968, we're going to have these books on their shelves in a few days. The Rapple Drive Chronicles, Mike Crade.
C-R-A-D-E.
And you said he's a doctor now?
He's a medical doctor, but his father I think it was his father had a lot to do with beginning the library.
So I think his father was one of the first trustees,
yes,
or something like
and
that.
he mentioned a few other people as well that are in there that were involved with creating this library that we're in right now.
All right, so a
lots
little
of
insight into
connections.
Colonie in the late 60s. Zina?
Okay, this is my attempt of putting in some fiction into our list of books because we usually have a dearth of that. And I haven't actually read this, but I read the reviews somehow, and I put a reserve on it and came on my desk. And it's science fiction, something I never read anymore. I have read all the basics, the classics from, Ursula Le Guin, is that how you pronounce the name?
Yes, Ursula Le Guin.
And I read the Dune series. I read a lot of Isaac Asimov.
Isaac Asimov, yeah.
Yes, and there's something else I've read too. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I haven't read a lot of Stranger in a Strange Land.
That's right.
And I haven't read as an adult. I was reading that in my it would have been in my 20s. And I haven't really read any science fiction since then. This is current. This is a new book. It's called Embassy Town by China, and I'm going to massacre the last name, Mayville, M-I-E-V-I-L-L-E, but it has a little mark above the E, so I don't know, is that French or German?
I think so, yeah.
It's science fiction, contemporary. It's about a contact between aliens and human beings, and it sounds strange, but they're calling it a linguistic science fiction work, and it's about life on an alien planet, and Embassy Town is the city or abode of on this alien planet where human beings can go and interact with the aliens, but it's the only place where those aliens can understand the human language. There's something strange about the bubble. But it has really good reviews, really good reviews. And there's actually 11 copies in the system. We own one, but other libraries, a total of 11 copies in the system. And there are no reserves on this book. And I just started the first couple of pages, and it looks wonderful. And so did the reviews. It got a starred review from Publishers Weekly, and it was reviewed in all the other major review sources that we look at. So you might want to try it yourself for something different. This is going to be one of my beach reads. China Mayville, it's called Embassy Town. That's one word.
Now, you mentioned all those classic science fiction authors you read.
Yes.
Now, did you ever read Arthur C. Clarke?
Is that Star Trek?
No.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
2001?
2001. No, I didn't read it.
His books are
I saw 2001.
Books are really good too.
Okay,
All right,
there you go.
now's the time of the show. We have some announcements we're going to make. We have 3 little quick things here to talk about. One's book related. No, they're all kind of book related. It's the
Yes,
library.
they are. They're all book related.
All right, now this book is called The Great Divorce by Elian Wu. The subtitle is A 19th Century Mother's Extraordinary Fight Against Her Husband, the Shakers, and Her Times. Now, you read this, right?
I did. And I interviewed the author.
That's right. You interviewed the author on our show, so you may know this book. This book, we have like 5 or 6 copies, and they've all been out for the last year. So a lot of people watching may have read this. The reason I'm talking about it is this fall, during October, early November, we're going to have several events centered on this book discussions, some speakers. We have a little documentary about the Shakers from over in the Waterville Shaker Heritage Society. So we're still in the planning stages. We're not exactly sure everything we're doing, but we're going to be having many events centered on this book. It takes place in Albany. Obviously, the Shakers are involved. She was granted a divorce. This is the only person granted a divorce by the New York State Legislature. And all this takes place in the early 1800s, like the 18 teens. Is that right?
Right, exactly.
So we're going to have a lot of events. So check our newsletter for anything. We're going to have a couple different book discussions for sure, and some speakers on various topics related to this book.
Including the author.
Hopefully we'll have the author here.
And it's about.
I think we were supposed to say that.
It's all right. It's about women's rights and child custody, and also has a lot to do with the politics of the New York State Legislature, as well as the Shakers. So it's got a really broad local appeal.
Okay. All right. So look for our newsletter for this in October and November. Second thing we have here, this show. If you're watching this show before September 14th, because these shows are on all different times. This fall, we don't have our noon book review during the summer, so our noon book reviews are starting back up. Our first noon book review is going to be on Wednesday, September 14th. We call it noon book review, but they start at 12:15. And our first noon book review this year is a book you probably all have heard of, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lakes. It's about a woman a black woman from the South, I think. They unwittingly took some cells from her for something. I forgot why.
She had cancer.
She had cancer.
Aggressive form of cancer.
And apparently her cells, they've been using her cells for all kinds of stuff.
Experimentation.
For experimentation.
Lab research.
For lab research. And apparently her cells have helped in a lot of research all through since the 1920s.
Development of drugs.
So it's all about her life and the development of drugs and how her cells have helped modern biology. And our book reviewer is going to be Barbara Danowski. She is the chair of the biology department at Union College, and she actually teaches, all the classes she teaches are about cells. She teaches classes in the mechanisms of cell regulation, physiology of cells and organisms, and molecular biology of the cell. So this should be a really very interesting noon book review.
It's a lot about the medical ethics and whether, because this woman and her family never knew this was being done,
Okay,
that her cells were being used and that they made such a
Okay.
huge contribution. And so a lot of it is about the ethics of using
Okay,
people's-
I haven't read it yet, but I know that the book in hardcover was on the bestseller list for over a year, and it's been on the bestseller paperback list for half a year. And last year, it was on over 60 best books of the year lists from all
So
over
it's
the
not
place.
just scientific, it's about policy,
Okay.
it's about, medical ethics.
And finally, I have to reach down for this. We have tote bags here you can buy at the library, sponsored by the Friends of the Library. If you come to the library, you can put your books in here. Now, can you see that? There you go. The thing with the book the thing with the tote bag, they're $10. They're very durable, the last years. And if you buy a tote bag for $10, every Saturday morning over at the crossings, the Friends have an ongoing used book sale. When you buy a tote bag, you can fill this up for free on your first time back. And then on subsequent trips, if you want to go to that book sale, you can fill up your bag for only $5. So that's a pretty good deal. But the bags they're very nice, very durable, and they got a picture of the William K. Stanford Town Library on here. They're nice bags. And actually, when we sold bags about 10 years ago, similar to this, we couldn't, they went like hotcakes, as they say. So we got a lot of them here. So that's it for this time, and we will see you next.
Fundraiser. Wait a minute.
Oh, it is
Fundraiser.
all the money,
benefits
all the money
library.
for the tote bags and at the book sale at the crossings.
Will benefit
go
the libraries in one way.
benefit the library and the friends take care of that.
Sorry,
So,
Joe.
That's okay. So we'll see you next time on So Many Books, So Little Time.